Hello, hello. Welcome to Friday Office Hour. Give me just 1 second. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. There we go. Alrighty. So thank you for joining me today. For those of you that are on Twitter, hello, can't see you. So feel free to pop into the YouTube studio so that you can interact with me in the comments. All right, so for intros, welcome everyone to Under the Hood. It's an online community for aspiring, current, or retired STEM students and professionals. This is also a space for the friends and family of STEM people where you can hear the firsthand accounts of the behind-the-scenes experiences of those you care about who have dedicated their working lives to careers in STEM. Welcome, welcome. So as I stated a minute ago, if you are on Twitter, I can't see how you're interacting with the thread. And also you can remain relatively anonymous on YouTube unless your name is in your username. So feel free to drop in on the YouTube studio or on the YouTube side and pop questions in the chat. Never hesitate to reach out. I want to give a disclaimer about this online community. Just note that the views I express here do not reflect that of my institutions, both present and past. And I am covered under Title IX with the content that I produce here. So please do not raise any Title IX questions because you should send those concerns to the appropriate office at your institution. Okay. So I'm pretty excited today. It has been one of those weeks where I feel like a lot of environmental justice issues converged. And so tensions are high, obviously, with the new climate bill and with other things that are going on in Washington. And I've been pretty keyed into the Environmental Justice for All bill that is being proposed to be reviewed by the House of Representatives, and upon positive vote, it will be voted on in the Senate. And if it is approved in both of those houses, it will be ratified as law. So today I thought I would dedicate office hour to activism and how to become an advocate. How do you use your role as an academic, as a STEM student to support policy and to support important legislation that really changes the course of really our role as researchers, academic, and practitioners. I'm going to quote one of my activist friends, Andrea Vidal-Ray. She told me that she heard me say something in one of my talks to the community. She said, one thing that stood out to me when you spoke was that nothing changes without policy. And it's really true. There's only so much we can do when it comes to making systemic changes that affect multiple systems at multiple scales, and that's except through policy changes. And so I personally think that it's important for us as technical experts to get involved, specifically when legislation goes through that has serious implications for engineering and how systems interact with people in the environment. So let's get started. I'll take you through the history of my activism and how you can get involved. Okay, so I hope she doesn't mind, but the person that really got me started in my scholar activist, is Dr. Gretchen Goldman. Hey, Gretchen. Gretchen was formerly an associate or director of one of the groups at the Union of Concerned Scientists, and she has since taken a position at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, a fitting role for her considering how effective she's been, or she was at her role at UCS. So Gretchen and I overlapped at Georgia Tech from 2010 to 2011. She was finishing up her PhD and I was starting mine. I was a master's student. And about 7 years later, we kept up between then. I was in DC for a NASA trip. And I asked her, I said, hey, can I come up to UCS and just look around? She said, sure. So I went up to the Union of Concerned Scientists DC office, and it was lovely. It was magical. I made some pretty decent connections with the analysts there. And I told them that I was gearing up for a faculty position at UC Riverside, and I was living in Nevada at the time. And they said, hey, do you want to get involved? We could use you, and we could use your voice. I said, oh, I don't think I can do this. I don't think this is for me. But they said, no. This is precisely what we do. We work with STEM professionals and experts to help them craft a message and lend their voice to support important legislation. I said, sure, I'll do it. And for those of you not familiar with the Union of Concerned Scientists, the logo is right there on the screen. I'm going to link the website in the description box after the live. So I got started with them. First doing some watchdog events in Nevada related to various bills and elections, local elections. And kind of after I left Nevada, I really got more heavily involved in 2018 when I moved to New Jersey, and I had some time on my hands between my postdoc and my faculty position at UCR. And the first thing they asked me to do was write a blog. And I was terrified. I was terrified. Like, you guys want me to write a blog? And for those of you that follow me on Twitter, you wouldn't believe at how nervous I was to speak in a non-technical kind of persuasive way instead of an informative, informal way like we do in academia. So they wanted me to talk about what are called glider vehicles. Glider vehicles have, I believe, a new chassis, but an old refurbished engine that would be a super polluter. And somehow this glider loophole would allow heavy duty trucks to emit more than they should in terms of like particle pollution. And so they wanted me to speak out against this loophole. And of course, the loophole didn't pass. And it was an amazing experience. So my first draft of the blog post was very dry and uninspiring. And I remember working with an analyst, Jana, and she says, Sunny, you've got to put more emotion into this. I'm like, oh, but we don't use emotion. We don't use emotion in academia. But eventually you can actually go and look up this blog post, No Shortcuts for Dirty Diesel Engines. It should be in the UCS archives. And that was my first like official professional policy advocacy responsibility or act or whatever. And I was hooked ever since. Yeah. So the next thing I did through UCS, this was actually on my birthday, was the Clean Cars Fly-In. It was during a time when they were trying to roll back emission standards on cars. and we needed to stop this rollback. I think it was introduced by some people that are against tighter standards on emission factor or emissions for mobile sources. And they flew me in to lobby the Nevada senators at the time. Once again, I was really nervous, but they guided me through the way. And my job was to come in for one day and meet with either the legislative staffer for the senator or the senator themselves. And I actually did meet with a Nevada senator at that time and a staffer for Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. So it was really fun to be on Capitol Hill, and I think it was an effective lobby day. Those standards were not rolled back, thankfully. And as a result of my experience with the Clean Cars Fly-In, I was asked to speak at a science night event for UCS, where I provided lobbying tips. So this would have been in January, February of 2018. So I provided some lobbying tips for people interested in getting involved, mainly STEM folks who were being asked to lobby for the first time. These were my tips. So I recommended that people read all the material that's provided. So they honestly inform you of whatever issue they're asking you to advocate for, which is super helpful. And it's really easy to read. It's not technical and overly jargony like our stuff. The policy advocacy documentation and flyers and pamphlets, they're always really easily digestible. So I would, if you're asked to lobby, read everything they give you. And then when you're developing, I guess, your 3-minute spiel, if you have to lobby a senator or a representative, mainly senators, because that's the vote that is always pretty contentious, you'll want to choose the talking points that resonate with your personal experiences and passions, because that type of advocacy will be more effective. Like, you want to harness your emotion when you're doing policy advocacy, which is the complete opposite of what you want to do for academic audiences, right? Academia and technical communication in the traditional sense can be very monotone and uninspiring, but the SciComm people that are listening, you can chime in about, I don't know, how to be more effective at your communication. The next thing you do is, before you go and actually lobby those people that you have to convince, you want to recite your talking points out loud with your UCS host, if you're doing it through UCS, and they can help you through your stumbling points. They can say, hey, you need to have more emphasis here. You know, they can train you and coach you on how to be more effective. If you do have to travel for a lobbying event, if you're not local to DC or your local legislature, go ahead and do the mapping of the locations where you have to be so that you can show up about 10 to 15 minutes early, because you may be nervous. I was very nervous because for my first lobbying event, I was going to Capitol Hill. And stay positive and relaxed, because you may be super fired up to go in there and blast the senator and be like, you're making a huge mistake. This is, largely inappropriate for your constituents. When you get to DC and you see the historic buildings and the marble and the beautiful, like, gilded columns and all of the art from a long time ago, you get distracted. Not only that, there's a ton of people walking around in their expensive suits and they're moving quickly, and you may see someone that you usually see on TV. You get distracted, and it's really easy to get caught up in the DC like energy. So it's really important to stay focused on the task at hand. And so if you're ever watching anything going on in DC and you're just like, what's going on with this person? They're probably just getting caught up in the fanfare of being in DC. Because, to be quite honest, it's really exciting. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is talk about how you can get involved. And one of the ways you can get involved is going directly to the UCS website, ucs.org, and you can interact with whatever letter requests, as you can see on the screen, that they may be promoting for that time period. And it's really easy. You just click send letter, and there's a pre-filled form, and all you have to do is put your demographic and contact information, and you can send the pre-filled or the prescribed letter, or you can delete it and write your own text and then send the letter. Because I'll explain in a minute why written comment is so important. Okay. Not only does it build momentum and support for whatever legislation you are seeking to support or go against, but it actually gives the committee members that are supporting the bills additional ammunition and talking points and points of debate when they have to go up and debate with the other legislators. So I'm going to get into why it's so important for the experts to get involved, because they will take your expert talking points and use them in the debate. So this is a democratic nation, and your voice does matter. And if elected officials are doing their job right, they are going to take what they learn from you and use that on Capitol Hill. Does it always happen? All right. So I'm going to take you all through how I got from doing work for UCS to who I am right now. Most of you know me as a community engaged researcher, but there was a link here between UCS and the work I do today. So I am going to shout out Miss Graciela Mendez. You can see her in the top right of that screen grab, where she was speaking at a Union of Concerned Scientists event about building trust-based community partnerships for scientists. Now, the video, I think, is private. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself, but there is a handout associated with that event that I will link in the description box. But Chella is speaking at that event about building partnerships because she has experience both on the positive and the negative side with interacting with STEM academics or academics in general. So I got involved with community advocacy work because of Chella's relationship with UCS. And so UCS knew I was moving to Southern California, and they immediately connected me with the local organizers. And so at the time, Chella was with CCAJ, or the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. And I met her, and I'm not going to steal her shine, but that video, this video that she spoke in, really details the nitty-gritty of her experience with getting to know me, working with me, and just it's really heartwarming. And I pretty much cried when I listened to it. So shout out to Chella. I point to her as the person that got me started in community engaged research in Southern California. Okay. So, hey Chella, if you're listening. So fast forward, Chella and 5 or 6 other members of CCAJ then formed their new organization, the People's Collective for Environmental Justice, which is a near and dear community organization that is grassroots, home built, that really goes hard in the paint for the residents of the inland Southern California frontline communities. And I'll link their website below, but most of you may have already interacted with PSEDG via episode 10 of Under the Hood, where I had a really great conversation with PSEDG organizer Dee Ariana, where she gave tips about how we can be most effective as advocates for community organizations. So be sure to check out that episode. It's really informative. And so over the past 4 years, from 2018 to 2022, I have been working really, really closely with CCAJ and PSEDGE to harmonize and co-produce and work alongside community, promote data sovereignty and community sovereignty in advocating for their needs. So I won't go into 2018 to 2020. I can talk about that at a later date. But PSEDGE and the organizer, Andrea Vidare, brought this next point to my attention. Okay. So Andrea, who's in the picture, I don't want to put her on blast. Andrea hit me up maybe a month ago, and she goes, "Yeah, Dr. Sunny, I try to tell them just call me Sunny, but she's like, well, Dr. Sunny, will you come and will you be willing to testify at the community hearing for the Environmental Justice for All Act?" And y'all, without thinking, I was just like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. And to be quite honest, I thought it was a local effort. I thought it was a local scale effort. And so she was like, yeah, okay, I'll send you the details. And so when I got the details, I saw that this was a national scale effort. This is a national bill. And I go, oop, what have I gotten myself into? Well, as it turns out, I'm really glad that I still have my connection to PSEDGE, and because this legislation is really important. The Environmental Justice for All Act was initiated in 2020 by two representatives, Representative McEachin from Virginia, a Democrat, and Representative Grijalda from Arizona, also a Democrat. And recently they have brought in Representative Stansberry of New Mexico to also support the bill. And as you can see, these are some photos from the community hearing that I went down to Bloomington, California to speak at. And it was a really moving and, quite frankly, an emotional hearing, because everyone you see in the photos, and there's actually a whole host of community members sitting behind us. And what you can't see is that the U.S. representatives are actually sitting in front of us with their staffers. And they've got the emblem of the U.S., I think it's U.S. Congress or U.S. government in front of them. So it's actually pretty official. And what they're doing is Representative Grijalva and Stansberry were on a tour to collect public comment and public testimony in support of the bill. They use our testimony to formulate their rebuttals when they go back to the Natural Resources Committee to debate the dissenters, which are largely from the Republican side of the aisle. And so we were asked to line up and give our testimony, and it was really emotional. I absolutely enjoyed meeting everyone there. We've got Emily, we've got Jim there, who are community members whose testimonies just brought me to my knees. And then to the left of me is the majority leader for the the California representatives. That's Representative Eloise Reyes, who had no idea I was a professor. It's actually pretty hilarious. So this is the type of activity that you lead up to. Once you get your advocacy voice strong, these are the type of events that you could be asked to speak at. All right. So I'm actually, after I'm done talking here, we're going to play some of the hearing, and I'm going to give my comments about it. I'm going to play some of the dissenting debate from one of the representatives that I found to be particularly grating. And I'll tell you about how to lend your support for the bill in just a second as well. All right. So we did the hearing back in earlier this month, I believe. And the hearing that the debate, the markup for the bill, that meeting was held this week, and it passed out of committee, as you can see on the screen. That means that whatever amendments were going to be entered and used to edit the bill from the Natural Resource Committee are done, and they're going to send it to be voted on in the House and the Senate. So if you want to submit a written comment, and so what's a written comment? It's essentially a letter that explains why you support the bill. I will link the fact sheet about the bill in case you're interested in what you're actually supporting. And so some of the key features are the fact that the bill would amend and strengthen Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prohibit discrimination based on disparate impact and overturn the Supreme Court decision in Alexander v. Sandoval to permit private citizens, residents, and organizations to seek legal remedy when faced with discrimination. All right, so that's one of the key features of the act. Also, the act will address cumulative impacts, where it will require the consideration of cumulative impacts in permitting decisions under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, and ensures that permits will not be issued if the project cannot demonstrate a reasonable certainty of no harm to human health. So I will post the fact sheet so that you can know exactly what you're supporting. And I am absolutely throwing my support behind this bill because I understand the implications and what it means for communities like Cancer Alley and the Bloomington community, who are already inundated with petrochemical plants and all kinds of carcinogenic industrial activity, as well as the IE that is being absolutely inundated with warehouses. It would stop that kind of activity by requiring anyone that's asking for a permit to consider the cumulative impacts of the environmental decisions that have already taken place. And some of those impacts could include a relatively higher rate of asthma and cancer, cardiorespiratory impacts in a cluster. And we see those clusters in Cancer Alley. We see those clusters near the San Bernardino rail yard, which is seeking to expand itself. There's also expansion efforts being proposed for the Colton north-south rail that runs through Colton, and we're desperately trying to stop that as well. So for those of you that may see my tweets and you cannot understand why I'm always talking about environmental justice and Amazon, well, those rail lines support cargo shipment from the West Coast ports in Los Angeles and Long Beach and Oakland to get goods to the rest of the country, you guys. So your one-click order is actually tied to a whole host of logistics activities that are impacting the communities on the front line that live next to these logistics infrastructure that support like one-day ordering or whatever like that. So if you personally haven't walked around Colton, walked around San Bernardino, lived in inland Southern California, longer than your trip down to look at the orange groves or see the corpse plant bloom at the botanical gardens at UCR, you really don't have a feel for what it's like to not have fresh air in the summer. Okay? People dread the summer in inland Southern California because it's hot, there's plenty of smog, and you don't want to go outside, and you just, it's miserable there. Okay? So I'd like to ask for your grace and your understanding when you see my tweets for advocacy to support things like the Environmental Justice for All Act, as well as in support of the advocates that are fighting for their quality of life in inland Southern California. All right, that's all I have for this presentation. So literally, when it comes to written comment, you can draft a letter on your preferred letterhead and simply email it to a legislative staffer or email it to the representative themselves. So email with letters attached is just as effective. Okay. I'm gonna go and see if any late breaking questions are put in the chat or put in the nothing. With that, the next thing I want to do is play a little bit of the hearing. All right. So to my knowledge, everyone can hear this. If it turns out that no one can hear the audio here, actually, I see that there's a few folks in the studio. If you cannot hear this audio, just let me know. So let's listen to Representative Lauren Boebert explain to the Natural Resources Committee why she thinks whatever amendment that she's proposing needs to be included in the legislation.
Yields. Let me now recognize Representative Boebert. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here we are again. We're pretending to work. We're pretending to do something while Americans are facing high gas prices. Don't worry, Joe Biden lowered them a couple cents, but they're still up a couple of dollars, and people are having a really hard time affording that. They're having a hard time affording energy for their homes. They're not making great money at their jobs because there's been tremendous opposition from government officials regulating them into poverty. Here in this committee, in the House of Representatives, words don't matter because we can just change the definition if it doesn't fit the narrative. I think Americans are tired of that. Americans want fairness. And when you just change the definition of a word to make it fit what you're wanting to do, well, that's not really fair. We've changed the definition of recession. We changed the definition of vaccine. Democrats even changed the definition of fully vaccinated when that wasn't working as they wanted to. They changed the definition of female, woman, climate change. Remember when that was global warming? Well, that was debunked, so they had to change it. So now it's just climate change. And now, today, justice. Democrats are perverting justice. We cannot and should not allow the left to continue to dictate terms, definitions to the American people. The idea of this so-called environmental justice, which is just what this bill is based on, has a dangerous Marxist foundation. It is just one of the many extensions of justice, extensions that include racial justice, economic justice, and social justice. Democrats want all of this to be about social justice before the November midterm elections because they can't debate, they can't argue the policies. Americans feel the response from the policies. They feel when their communities are regulated into poverty, they feel this energy poverty that Democrats have created. So let's just focus on social justice. This only serves to divide Americans based on race, wealth, ethnicity, and many other factors. Promoting environmental injustice is what you're really doing, allows the left to support certain Americans over others. Most people would recognize how wrong and unjust this really is. A government works on behalf of the citizens, not on behalf of our adversaries, not on behalf of China, like we've seen this committee do, this administration do. America was founded on the essential idea of equal justice under the law. It is the same expression seen on the front of the Supreme Court building, and it is not a coincidence that the Supreme Court and its members have recently been subject to increased threats and violence by the left, There's a reason why Supreme Court justices have to flee restaurants, cannot remain in their homes because they fear being attacked or worse, assassinated. Put simply, Democrats don't believe in justice. They specialize in perverting justice to the point when they prefer to promote divisions in American society. The modern Democrat Party continues to embrace divisions based on race and wealth. And we must remember that what they stand for is anything but the principle of justice. Because the Democrat Party's unhealthy focus on dividing Americans, there are several concerning provisions in this bill. And I can't get to them all in this time, but Section 8 would codify the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council. Just what America needs, another White House council. Don't worry, we're from the federal government and we're here to help. If there's anything in this bill that qualifies as a complete waste of taxpayer dollars, I think that this new council deserves an honorable mention. Section 9 would require that federal agencies develop new environmental justice strategies within 2 years. Section 15 would ensure that federal agencies order environmental justice into employees' daily activities. Section 12 would authorize $10 million a year without a sunset to develop transport systems to connect critically underserved communities with greater access to public lands. Finally, Section 28 and 29 would unnecessarily ensure that Americans face high energy costs for the foreseeable future. It makes lease sales optional for BLM and raises the royalty rate from 12.5% to 8.5%. It's clear that this committee's majority would rather have our geriatric president fist bump Saudi Arabia's evil prince instead of relying on the American roughneck to supercharge our economic recovery. All members of goodwill in this committee should reject this bill. It is not a serious proposal. Democrats should go back to the drawing board and try again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Gentlelady yields. Let me now recognize
She said that. She told us. She told us, y'all. This is a complete waste of taxpayer money. This is a complete waste of our time, and this is a bill that seeks to promote injustice. So if anyone ran into me on Berkeley's campus this week and you were wondering if I was a little bit high strung, it's because of this nonsense, okay? And I applaud Representative Grijalva, who I've met in person, for his resolve, because it couldn't be me. It really couldn't be me. For those of us that have studied and this is our lived experience when we're thinking about environmental justice, it is just absolute cringeworthy to hear this type of fear mongering, this type of red herring, and just illogical and unfactual debate taking place. So I'm going to do some point by point commentary about some of the things she said. And trust me, if you want to go and sit through the other 10 hours of this debate, which is basically them voting on amendments, and thankfully all of the amendments, most of them that were proposed by the Republicans, were voted down. But if you want to hear the debate from Representative Graves from Louisiana, who I also thought was completely it wasn't helpful at all. In fact, I didn't even see him reading from any notes, meaning I think he was making up his talking points as he went along, which was incredibly frustrating. All right. So Representative Boebert talked about the changing of definitions to suit whatever political ends that the committee is trying to get to. And it's just absolutely unreal. The wordsmithing and the picking on syntax that is being used as a debate point. It's infuriating. Also, Representative Boebert talked about gas prices and how Americans are already suffering from their gas prices. Yeah, we are. But the profit mongering of industry is what is driving our gas prices up, not environmental justice legislation. So once again, it's faulty logic. And what I saw in the hearing is that the Democrats really didn't even waste their time, coming after these stupid talking points, which is something that I guess they are trained to do, but it requires like a pretty large amount of restraint. Based on some of the things she said, it's evident to me that she's never spent time in an environmental justice community or had to live in a community that is designated as environmental justice. She's never lived near an industrial source, or if she has, I don't know. But if you lived in a location that is overrun with pollution, been split apart by transportation infrastructure, then you'd immediately understand the importance of this bill. When I hear the debate in this hearing, I immediately can tell who does not spend time in these communities, because they don't have the lived experience, and there's no cultural competency when it comes to what people are actually facing. So it's just such a waste of time listening to people that don't even have context for the bill and why it's being proposed. I think Bober said something about, we're supposed to be working on behalf of citizens, and we're not. Literally, the leadership for this bill, Grijalva, McEachin, and Stansbury, were out there talking to us. They're getting their speaking points from community members. They spent the time, they talked to us in a meaningful way, and they took heed to what we were saying. They went and saw the atrocities that are happening. So I'd say that this is a process by which the representatives are working on behalf of citizens and residents and even undocumented people. I found issue with the accessing of, or the use of, Supreme Court justice fear-mongering in this debate. I really don't understand what Supreme Court justices have to do with this issue. Okay, this is completely done in the legislature. Like, I don't get it. Maybe so the act that will be passed in the legislature, in the House of in Congress, is strictly on Congress. So just grasping at straws and talking about things that don't matter is also pretty infuriating when it comes to debating this bill. She mocked the White House council that is set to be formed for this bill, which I think is a mistake. It is not a waste of money. In fact, it's great to have crosstalk and collaboration across the different branches of government when it comes to implementing laws and rules like this. I think it's actually a great idea. It's not a waste. We can talk about other wasteful things that happen in government, but this one for sure is not. She also picked on a $10 million per year allocation for reversing the harmful impacts of transport systems. So for anyone who has been keyed into the climate bill that just got proposed, we all know that when you break down those numbers, the billions of dollars that are set aside for climate justice, we know that $10 million a year is chump change in comparison to defense spending, local spending, if you know what I mean, local defense spending. So $10 million a year is pennies when you think about the cumulative impacts that the U.S. interstate system, designed to pretty much disrupt the livelihood of Black and Brown communities. When you think about the opportunity costs for those systems, $10 million a year is hardly it pales in comparison to the resources lost due to those transport systems being put in place. And I'll actually link to an essay penned by James Butler, a grad student at UC Berkeley, who penned a pretty poignant piece about a particular roadway in Louisiana that continues to cause unnoticed and like harm in the community, even though they've adapted to this heavy piece of infrastructure being in their lives. And in its absence, it could probably make things a whole lot better for them. And the last part about that I want to talk about in terms of her debate was this reference to our president fist bumping someone in the Saudi Arabia leadership, calling him geriatric. It's just unnecessary, right? I just can't believe that our elected officials show up to their jobs and say ridiculous things, say unnecessary things that take away from the support for important legislation. So, Representative Boebert, if you want to talk about waste of taxpayer dollars, I think you've done a great job demonstrating how to do that by wasting everyone's time with talking points that have nothing to do with environmental justice. And I in particular, I don't appreciate it. All right. If you'd like to see me do commentary on any other part of this hearing, maybe we can address it another time. But other than that, I am done with my reaction to the committee markup that took place this Tuesday, I believe. Okay. I'll link to the YouTube video that contains the committee markup hearing. So I hope that those of you that see this stream, that are listening live, that you are inspired to become involved, particularly if you are a technical expert in STEM. And if there are pieces of legislation that are being put forward that you find that are technically incorrect and that you feel like you want to write in about and refute, or if you want to go through organizations designed to support your advocacy, like Union of Concerned Scientists, I recommend that you do that. You can start by emailing them, signing up for their mailing list, sending a prescribed letter to get your feet wet in advocacy. I wish everyone the best in their advocacy journey. I think it is up to us that have been trained in these areas, and especially those of us that sit at the nexus of social justice, environmental justice, and STEM technical training. It's important for us to not be silent and speak up when necessary. I'm going to link an ES&T viewpoint that was authored by Gretchen Goldman, myself, and a few others, where we talk about how advocacy could actually enhance our academic experiences, and we may find purpose in those activities. Yeah. So I, in particular, have had a great time on my schoolactivist journey. And I wish the same for you. I may respond to one Friday office hour question. And I think I'm going to leave the rest of them for next week. Yeah. So I think this is a good way to end office hour. I like this question. It says, so this person kind of knows of my rhetoric. They know who I am. It says, you've discussed the importance of looking down the ladder, although most academics don't. Why is it so important? So the question is, why is it important to look down the proverbial ladder? So in academia, we describe career levels as a ladder, particularly if you are a faculty member. I am considered a ladder ranked faculty. So that's someone who goes through the levels of assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, and then distinguished professor, and finally emeritus. So each one of those steps is a rank, a ladder rank. And so you can extend the ladder either way. And looking down the ladder really captures your postdoctoral scholars, your graduate students, post-baccalaureate scholars, undergraduate, and K through 12. I make it a point to talk to, listen to, get the advice from, consider the inputs from people that I consider to be a little bit down the ladder, not in a hierarchical sense, but they are less advanced in their career than I am, in their super duper early career. One thing I found is that the super duper early career folks that have not ascended to like your rank have some of the freshest and best ideas. Okay, they're viewing problems with fresh eyes, without what I call indoctrination. Because the further along you get in academia, the more you start to conform to its system, to its unwritten rules about not being able to do research in a field that you're not formally trained in. You can work with a collaborator. You can get some continuing education along the way. You can retrain yourself at any point in your career and switch directions. No one tells you what you can do. Stay in your lane is not in my vocabulary when it comes to academia. So this type of indoctrination tends to not be prevalent in the super duper early career folks. And so I find it really important for me to listen to them, talk to them, to make sure that I'm remaining grounded and not getting too deep into academic indoctrination to where I can't even problem solve anymore because I'm so afraid of rocking the boat or going against some really archaic administrative practice that is really working against innovation, working against research. Also, I think it's important to talk to super duper early career people to help them build their confidence in the space. They simply will not know what's in this hidden curriculum if you don't talk to them. They're going to be doing trial and error, and they're going to be doing guess and check. And we can prevent that as those of us that are further up the ladder. We can, explain the hidden curriculum, and we can give them our best practices so that they won't hit as many roadblocks along the, as coined by our Asmaret, this hostile obstacle course. We can help our fellow scholars a little bit further down the ladder to avoid those obstacles. And really, a marker of success is when your progeny and the people that come behind you can experience a level of freedom and a level of flexibility that you couldn't. That's the marker of progress, I think, when they can go through systems with the knowledge of their advantages and resources and privilege and still be effective without having to go through the pain points that you did. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap up for today. Thank you all for listening or catching the playback, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.